A little thief named Nico. 3 days after leaving the eastern side of Halmar Forest in the province of Barrius, Dare had almost reached his home. He was about a league away from the small little doorway hidden by rock and brush, which only a few people knew of. It was very well hidden, as those who didn't know of its location would have to search very closely, for it used a little touch of his own magic to protect it from unwanted interest. The entrance nestled itself in the face of an overhang so high that eagles circled below it. He was weary from his journey, and so was surprised by one of the perimeter defenses that Ambus had set up to protect the area from anyone who wasn't seeking refuge or meant harm. A 4-foot-high, auto-revolving crossbow burst out from the ground from where it was hidden, scanning for targets. Luckily, Dare was magically cleared for entry, and it paid him no mind. Still, it gave him quite the start. It was sunrise when he approached the doorway. He could barely see the outline of it, thanks to a splash of sunlight reflecting off a stream, flowing sluggishly out of the rock face and into a pool nearby. Yet he knew it was there by memory alone. He squinted against the bright light, eyes slowly adjusting as he found his way close to the entrance. When he reached the door, Dare brought his lips to the rock face and uttered, Dare peri, ianum telgaroth avili. Lines raced across the cool rock, creating the shape of an elven oak door, before cracking in the middle and slowly but surely swinging open without a sound. Perfectly balanced. Trust Feron to do such a thing, he said, while striding through into a dark passage hewn from stone. As Dare continued through the entryway, the floor changed from stone to earth and then to wood, illuminated by light that shone at the end of the tunnel. Waiting a short while, and edging closer to the light for his eyes to fully adjust, his lips curled slightly in disgust, hating the fact that he couldn't enjoy the sun like most other creatures of the world. Pushing himself as he did every time, Dare strained his eyes against the burning rays beaming into the tunnel, but eventually his attempt was thwarted, and his cowl had to be brought up to hide him from them. Stepping through the light, he found himself on a wooden balcony with a sloping staircase leading down into a verdant and luscious valley nestled inside the encompassing mountain. Slowly, he beheld his home. It took his breath away every time he emerged into this hidden place. Down below, there was a small group of structures, barriered by fields of grain. One was pouring smoke up towards the roof of the cavern that the valley was protected by, with a river flowing next to it, turning a massive water wheel which powered the machines inside the smoking building. The roof of the mountain magically allowed light into the place, and the smoke out. No one could see through the rock from outside. To anyone externally, it would appear as if they were just walking up a mountain that had lava inside, which produced the smoke through fissures of the rock. Another structure was his home, the one tree in the depression that was still standing, with a trunk wide enough to encompass 8 church towers strapped together, and so tall it brushed the top of the cavern. Below the massive tree, crystals filled with magical energy slowly flourished, hidden from most of the valley's inhabitants deep within the earth. Their strength was drawn from the tree at the rate it grew, and therefore the tree didn't grow any higher, and the few residents who knew of the crystals had a massive pool of energy to draw from when needed. As Dare looked past the huge tree, he saw that more human homes dotted the valley. They contained refugees that had been hunted away from their towns or cities, where they had tried to live in peace with humans who had no magic, but had failed. A meager cluster of magical civilization, Dare thought, as he stared at the populace going through their day-to-day activities. However, it was better than in the major cities, where you couldn't utter a spell without written consent, the guards were bastards, and the whole system was being run by humans with no magic. Here is a sanctuary from the war and slaughter, he thought, as he turned to the winding path that led down into the valley. Meandering down the tight road, and trying to remain out of sight, he made his way to his home and entered through a door in the bottom of the tree. He was intent on not being immediately spotted if he could help it, hoping to at least be able to arrive home for a short period before he was inevitably dragged into the problems of the populace that resided with him. Inside, the trunk was hollowed out, and a staircase had been inlaid into it, extending up to the first of many floors above, each dedicated to different parts of the magical world. Or, so they were supposed to be. The first floor was a colossal library, a store of knowledge that had been ferried and stolen through the war, and from many years before the conflict, to be hidden here. A few refugees sat or stood looking through the books and scrolls, and thanks to their distractions, none noticed him. He moved like a shadow past the doorway and onto the second floor, which was an infirmary, where 1 or 2 humans rested from injuries sustained when they fled the war. The next floor was a canteen, the smaller of the 2 in the valley, and as Dare passed it, his stomach grumbled in protest as he smelt wonderful aromas of cooked foods wafting into the hallway. Yet within, he also heard the sounds of families speaking with one another, and so he pressed on past the canteen. The last few floors were mainly for the storage of food and gear, in case of siege or bad winter. Ignoring these final rooms, Dare came to a door melded into the wood at the top of the stairs, about halfway up the massive trunk. He put his hand against the bark, and it split before him, allowing him entry to his abode. Looking around, everything was as it had been left. There was a bed against one wall, backed by an engraved likeness of an elven mother tree. Next to it, his dresser sat with some books on bestiar study and vinculum contraptions. Paying them no mind, he strode over to a stand with a small table next to it, and unbuckled his leather armor, hanging it on the stand as he removed each piece. Dare then removed his 2 throwing knives from his belt and put them on the table. Once de-armored, apart from his duo of long daggers still strapped onto his waist, he changed into a new set of black pants and a clean top, then sat in the middle of his room, cross-legged, closed his eyes, and relaxed, breathing a sigh of relief. Home. Dare felt a warm sensation in his gut. For the next few hours he pondered over what had occurred during the previous 8 days, from his arrival at Halmar, the traps in the fight with the mage, which he still winced at, and the meeting with Tenebrae himself. Dare still simmered at the way that thing is seen through his history, as if reading a book, but he willed himself to calm his emotions and continue to arrange his thoughts and memories into a tangible thread. The path to mastery is self-control, he thought, remembering his short time with the elven teacher Lardil, smirking a little at the memory before releasing it into his musical mind. After a good while, a knock broke him from his meditation, and Dare silently leapt to his feet, startled at the sudden noise. Fool, he whispered, chiding himself for losing track of his surroundings and focusing instead on just the thoughts and memories he had recollected. Loosening his daggers from their sheaths, he approached the door as another knocking sound could be heard, this time more hesitant than before. He reached it just as footsteps could be heard moving away, and a child's voice saying to itself, "I knew he wasn't back," in an unimpressed tone. Dare creaked the door open slowly and replied to the comment, "I am back, little one. What is it you wanted of me?" A small boy stood frozen, half down the stairs to the next floor, eyes wide with surprise. Lady Ambers wanted me to see if you were back, Lord Dare," the child squeaked. Dare took a step towards the boy, and the child cringed away slightly. He stooped down to his head height and smiled. "Lady Ambers is it now? She's gotten very full of herself in my absence, it would seem, and I am no lord, little one." He paused. "What's your name? I don't believe I've seen you before." "But Bara," the child said, slowly inching away from Dare. "Bara, a nice name you have. I'll call you it from now on. Tell me, why do you look so scared? Is it because I am an elf?" The child nodded slowly, clearly feeling uncomfortable with the racist notion. "Don't worry, I'm not angry at you, Bara. I'm used to it. But just you have no reason to fear me. This place is a sanctuary. Peace. No harm will come to you here. Not if I can help it." Bara seemed to relax a little. I heard that your magic was different," he said, abashed. Dare chuckled. "Well, you could say that." He twirled his finger in a nearby shadow, cast by a leaf hanging over a closed window in the stairwell, and slowly, to Bara's amazement, a dark rose, the stem of which was the color of midnight, and the petals blooming into deep purple with slashes of black running along their centers, formed and solidified out of the wood. Dare plucked it from its place of growth and handed it to Bara. "You can keep it. See it as thanks that you made it to this place safe. We've lost too many in this war, and I'm glad I cannot count you in that number." Bara smiled a wondrous smile that made Dare feel warm inside, and took the flower. "Run along now, Bara. Tell Lady Ambers I'll be with her shortly, after I have visited the canteen." The child ran off, clutching the newly grown flower close to his breast. Dare smiled as he watched him run down the stairs and out of sight. Returning to his room, he picked up his cowl and equipped it, then left, closing the door behind him. Climbing down 3 floors, he entered the canteen, which was empty save for the spirit who served the customers of the visited. Dare approached the spirit, which was made completely of wood, and spoke. "1 stew, rabbit please, with a side of greens. I don't mind which ones." The spirit nodded and walked away into the kitchen. As it did so, he sidled over to a valve set within the wall, which magically pumped water from the river below, and filtered it so the water was clean. He poured himself a glass and sat down at a nearby table, waiting for his food to be delivered. While waiting, he spun one of his blades between 2 fingers, absent-mindedly. Eventually the food arrived, and he voraciously consumed the dish, until none was left. From what he could understand, he was the only elf in existence that actually ate meat. The only reason was because he had to survive at such a young age, and therefore attained a liking to the food. His stomach grumbled in delight at finally being filled with something warm, and he felt content. With his meal finished and having drunk his fill, he stood, thanked the cook, and left the canteen, walking back down each of the floors and out of the main door to the giant tree, and approached the workshop where Ambus resided. As he approached the smoking building, he heard banging and shouts inside. Getting ready for an onslaught of questions, he pushed on the door, and it loudly creaked open. So much for a quiet entry, he thought, then realized that it wouldn't matter whether he entered with an explosion or a whisper. Before him lay carnage. Machines were in pieces over the floor, some still sparking with magical energy, and as he looked into the doorway, a flare of light made him suddenly duck in alarm as a firebolt flew past him and out of the building. Reactively, he sent a shadow to swallow the projectile, making sure it wouldn't burn down any of the homes outside, then continued into the reception of the workshop. Another shout echoed from further within the depths, and he heard the thundering of feet coming toward him. Bracing himself, he waited. From the door, in front of his vision, burst a long, darkened silver snake, with 2 wings on its front and 2 legs on its rear, about the size of a small dog. It ran out squawking, and holding a book in its little hands, which were midway down its wings. It barreled into him and tipped over, spilling its book onto the floor. Dare bent and picked the tome up, which he quickly realized was actually a grimoire. He kept the book close to his chest while staring at the creature. He knew who the grimoire belonged to, Ferron, who soon shot out of the doorway as well, looking very angry. He was a short man in his early 20s. A mop of curly brown hair fell around his ears, and for such a young human he was extremely bulky from working in the forge most of his life. A slightly pudgy face accompanied the brown hair, and he always looked like sweat was pouring from his brow. Red-faced, Ferron snatched the book from Dare and flicked through it quickly. "Good, it didn't steal any of the pages at least. Ambus, you better keep that blasted snake away from my grimoire, or I swear on all the aspects that I'll turn it into a stew," he shouted back into the room he had ran from while checking the book. After seemingly being satisfied that the creature had not damaged his grimoire, he started to turn back towards the inner part of the workshop. "Ferron, why is there a bookworm running around the forge?" asked Dare, a little surprised at the fact that such a creature was even in the area. "Ask that to that blasted woman in there. Welcome back, by the way, Dare. I would offer you my hand in greeting, but this bloody thing might steal it," Ferron replied, nodding at the worm that had managed to right itself, and was attempting to grab the book back from him with little mules escaping its small fanged mouth. "Aren't bookworms tied to one book until it either gets destroyed or they die?" asked Dare after a moment. "If so, how has this one gained an attachment to your grimoire? It looks old enough to have its own tome by a few years. I don't remember seeing this creature running around before I left." "I've no idea, but if it steals it again, I'm going to make a pouch from its scales. Maybe you should ask Ambus. She's the one who brought this thing here," Ferron replied in a crisp tone, and marched back into the depths of his smeltery, cursing to himself all the way. The worm chased after him, scuttling around his heels as he left, still seemingly attempting to demand the grimoire from the smith. Dare smiled to himself. "She's got another pet, it would seem," he said quietly, and strode into the room, continuing past the smeltery, which had started to glow with its work resumed. Weaving his way through the workshop, past broken automatons and pieces of armor, he beheld Ambus. She stood at the back of the room, surrounded by scrap wood and parts of traps splayed out across the floor, wearing her usual padded leather jerkin with a white shirt underneath. Knee-high leather boots rose up from soles of metal, and she wore dark brown sheepskin pants. Being elbow-deep in the workings of a revolving turret, she was seemingly unaware of her surroundings. Dare snuck up to her. It was a game they always played. He would try to catch her unawares, and Ambus would almost always catch him in some trap magically suspended around her. Today was no different. He got within 10 feet of her when vines crawled out of the ground, enveloping his ankles and wrists, hauling him off the stone floor to dangle above her. She turned, a wicked smile on her face, and giggled, showing her white teeth and freckles on her cheeks. "What's that now? 86 to 4? "Something like that. I lost count of 50, replied Dare. The so-called assassin of the night, brought low by naught but avinculus. Not really worthy of Pandora's tale, is it?" She called up to him. "No, I suppose not. Guess who owe you a drink." "You do, along with many others. I don't think you could ever pay off your bill to me, Dare," Ambus replied, laughing. I've noticed a pattern of you winning this. By the way, can I come down now, please? It's cold up here." He could feel the air current flowing toward the forge, and goosebumps had appeared across his smooth skin. "Ah, fine. You're no fun, you know that?" She dropped him like a sack of potatoes on the ground, and giggled again as he groaned. "So much for that elven dexterity," she goaded, swishing her long red hair from her face. "Give me a break, it's been a hell of a week." Standing up and brushing himself down, he walked over to her, and she hugged him. "What took you so long? I was getting worried." So was Ferron, but he wouldn't admit it.
"I heard that, you witch!"
called the man in question from a window in the forge, as he poured liquid iron into a cast. "A story for another time, Ambus, I'm afraid. Also, why is there a bookworm running around the shop with Ferron's grimoire?" Ambus squinted at him, not trusting his sudden change of topic, but soon retracted the look. "Fine, I'll trust you for now. But later I want to see you in the infirmary so you can have a proper check-over. And have a bath! Smells like you've been left to boil in the sun for a week."
Yes, fine. But what of the worm?"
His interest had become piqued. "Him? I saved him from the black market. They were slowly burning his book over a fire for sport. The poor thing couldn't move for the agony of it. So I showed them what it was like to have it done."
Dare groaned. Oh, you didn't anger the champions again, did you? They only just let you back in the bloody place.
No, greed didn't seem to care. Turned out they hadn't paid their rent. Anyway, I tied them up, took the worm, and made them watch as their store burnt down. Sadly, his book was already cinders when I did it. We brought him back and gave him some food and warmth in the smithy, and he found Farron's grimoire. It seemed to be love at the first sight for the little guy.
Dare smiled. Trust you to bring back something that would annoy Farron to no end.
Farron loves him, really. It's just infuriating when you're in the middle of a complicated crafting spell for an enchanted weapon, and suddenly a little wyvern pops out of his hidey hole in one of the cupboards and steals your grimoire from under your nose. Dare looked across at the smartery and saw the worm in question curled atop the grimoire in a small alcove near the main flame, fast asleep.
I suppose for him a book that can't burn by conventional means would be a dream come true,
he said. Ambus nodded in agreement. I was thinking of naming him Nico. A good name for such an adventurous little wyvern, don't you think?
Dare smiled again. Aye, that's a good one. Nico it is then.
He walked over to the contraption Ambus had been rummaging in and looked inside. It seemed one of the bolts had jammed partway through its loading sequence and wouldn't budge. Ah yes, this one's been quite tricky. Farron is normally one to sort these things out, but he's refusing to since I brought back his small friend. I can't think why. Amber strolled over to the contraption as Dare stared down at the jammed bolt. He clicked his fingers while whispering a spell she could barely hear. Motus was the one word she caught. Shadows inside the blister started to vibrate and shake the arrow until it suddenly shot up and fired out of the barrel, nailing an iron helmet to one of the workshop walls halfway down the room. He stepped back, surprised. Well, you didn't have to be quite so dramatic. Also, cheater! I was trying to do that without using magic, she chided.
If you gave it to Farron, he would just do the same thing, though it probably wouldn't have finished in such a deadly ending, replied Dare.
She shoved him playfully and walked off to retrieve the bolt from the wall. He looked around, waiting for her to return, and as he did, spotted a small, long bottle on the floor, glowing with a green light. He bent to pick it up, fascinated by the luminescent color. As his fingers touched it, however, it exploded, sending him flying into the rafters, one of which he caught with sheer luck, as his arms threw themselves around the rafter and he felt the solid wood dig painfully into his chest. Through blurred vision, Dare saw splinters of wood and pieces of glass from the bottle and surrounding tables, caught in his arm and clothes, which were steaming. An acrid smell filled his nose as the fumes climbed up to his height in the roof. After a short while, and ensuring that nothing else was going to randomly explode, he dropped down to the ground, landing heavily and falling to his side before coughing. Looking up, he saw Ambus trudging over to him, seemingly shell-shocked from the blast. I've told you before, and I'll tell you again, Dare. Don't randomly pick things up in the workshop. Go to the infirmary and get yourself healed, for goodness sake, she shouted. Standing up, bewildered and dizzy, he shambled off to the exit of the building, Ambus cursing behind him as she beheld the scattered remains of the crossbow. As Dare left the forge, he looked back and saw Nico. The bookworm was staring at him angrily, with his star-coloured silver eyes. Apparently he hadn't enjoyed being woken so violently from his nap. Nico snorted some fire at Dare, then rested his muzzle back onto his tail. Shaking his head to clear it from the ringing in his ears, Dare wandered up to the infirmary to be healed, clothes still smouldering in the air.